Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Special Audit Committee meeting. We acknowledge that this meeting is being held on Barunga land, and in my case, Narunga land, and we give thanks for the use of this meeting. So welcome everyone to the meeting, and just remind people that this meeting is being live streamed and also recorded. We do have an apology from the Mayor, and she's not able to attend. Also, Councillor Simpson is in the process of attending, so we hope he'll be with us shortly. I don't believe we have any other apologies or leave of absence. As we go through the agenda, do members have any conflicts of interest that they might need to declare in any of the items we're discussing? No? Okay, so we just move to our first report, which is the 2022-23 draft annual business plan. Perhaps we could hide that recommendation at this stage, I think. But in terms of the staff, is there a staff member who would like to give an introduction to this this item?
It's Kathy here. I'll hand over to Grant. Grant, if you could take members through this report, the strategies that are encompassed within the report, and the preparation of the draft annual business plan and budget, following which we can open up for greater discussion.
Thanks, Kathy. So first up, I guess as I'll go through sort of the key things outlined in the report. So I think this year we've expanded our process internally for the development of the annual business plan and budget, and that sort of started with the managers and leadership group within the organisation starting the development of business unit plans, which was something we didn't have the previous year. So that's just building up from the lower levels towards the strategies that we want in the annual business plan to deliver on council's strategic plan. So that involved, each area of the organisation going away and doing their own work on not the business as usual stuff, but the new stuff or the improvement type stuff. And then that was sort of discussed across the whole leadership group, and has been what has developed our what we've called the strategic initiatives that are in the plan. The capital program, the new upgrade was fairly fixed, I guess, from as members may remember, when we adopted last year's budget or this year's, we sort of combined 2 years worth of capital program to be able to leverage some grant funding for the Northern Coastline. So a lot of what's in the new upgrade program, a fair percentage of it was already fixed by that decision to adopt this year's budget. And the renewal budgets obviously come from our asset management plans. So while there might be a little bit of movement across years and that sort of thing as we reprioritise, most of that is coming straight out of the data and has been checked. You'll see that, for instance, we're about to start a new 3-year capital transport renewal program. After the large one we've had for the last 3 years, that's coming back down to sort of a more normal level after that investment in the backlog. So that's a lot of the inclusions in the plan and how they come about. So then, the discussion, I guess, then moves to the financial position, and there are some significant, I guess, strain on resources that council are experiencing. There's lots of things that council are trying to deal with, some of them legacy issues, I guess we've called them, but also getting the city ready for the future and all the things that are happening in the background outside of sort of council's orbit. So yeah, I guess it's putting some strain on our finances in terms of the resourcing we require. We also, as it outlined in the report, have some strain on our budget from the airport and, you know, the nature of COVID, and also all the upgrades we're doing out there, and some of the fun things on our requirements for our grant funding. So yeah, they're the sort of main pressures on council's budget. And obviously as well, the other bit is the rate increase that we're proposing. So the rate increase is within the parameters of our long-term financial plan, and actually slightly lower. So the long-term financial plan predicts rate increases of CPI plus 1.9% on average across the plan. You know, this year we're proposing a rate increase of CPI plus 1.6. With CPI and cost pressures being higher at the moment, you know, so the rate increase is 4.9%, but within the parameters of our long-term financial plan. And I guess that's coming back to parameters. Like, you know, I think it's important as we keep putting into the reports. We brought this to the last audit committee meeting. You know, we're developing the budget in line with the parameters that council have adopted early in the process. You know, so they're outlined in the report, the 7 sort of things that we're trying to achieve, and keeping in mind as we develop the budget and annual business plan. There is obviously, between some of those items, there's a bit of you know, you can't almost pull them all off necessarily. There has to be a bit of compromise in what we're trying to achieve, and so that's the balancing act that council are experiencing. Yeah, so happy to take any questions and any further discussion. You're just on mute, Alan.
Let me start again. Thank you, Grant, for that introduction. Councillor Simpson, welcome to the meeting. You didn't miss a lot, just, you know, there was a couple of minutes of the introduction from Grant, but there's been no discussion at this stage. So welcome to the meeting, and just remind you that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed.
Thank you for that. I apologise for my tardiness, but I had a little bit technical hiccup.
I think we can all understand what that's like. Members, we have a report there for our discussion, and I wonder if anyone has any comments or questions that they'd like to raise. What I might do is just ask members individually. So yeah, Councillor Osoto, do you have any, or you've raised your hand? So
I have.
Please go ahead.
I don't know if we should accept 4.9 as the rate rise for this year. My personal opinion is it should be a lot more than that, by about an extra 0.5. I mean, we're forecasting 3.3 CPI. Our federal minister and Treasury last week in their budget announced that the CPI is going to be about 4.3 for next financial year. We all know that the supply chain is being strained in this country and worldwide at this point in time. Any projects that we begin to do between now and next year, we know we're going to be under cost constraints there. My personal opinion is that we should add about an extra 0.5 onto our CPI this year to try and claw some of those costs back. I'm leaving that open for the rest to discuss. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I ask a question of the staff? The CPI, let me put it this way. How confident are the staff that they will be able to bring the budget in within the CPI that they've predicted?
Thank you. Good question. I think obviously the CPI is we tend to use March CPI for our budgets. I know that there are upward pressures on CPI, but what that does sort of push for us tends to push price increases. You know, they happen as delayed from the CPI figure. So we're predicting 3.3. That's what it currently is for this quarter for Adelaide. You know, it's a little bit up in the air at the moment as to what it will actually be for March. I think we get, you know, some of our contracts obviously have CPI built into them. So that's, I guess, on our operating budgets, CPI does impact in that way. There are other areas where we may have a little bit of discretionary budget, that sort of thing. And if there is a higher CPI, it just means we probably actually have a little bit less money to spend on programs and that sort of thing. So there is some ability to absorb a slightly higher CPI in some areas of the operating budget. And within the capital budget, we've built in, we basically build in 0.3% above CPI. But obviously we know at the moment that, you know, some contracts we're seeing 20% increases. So what we're, you know, over the next year or so, while we've got those supply chain issues, I think there'll be either some scope changes in projects potentially, or even the decision perhaps if we keep getting really high tenders, if there's the ability, we might push some projects out a little bit, even if we don't believe we can deliver them within the price we've got. Depends on how much room we've got to move with the scope and that sort of thing. Because, yeah, I mean, there are in capital land, we're seeing sort of very big increases, well above normal CPI. But I think for the operating budget, give or take, will probably be okay.
Okay, thank you. The decision to set the rate increase at less than or the 0.3 less than what had expected, is that based on, you know, affordability for ratepayers in particular?
So this year it's actually, so within the document, we actually build up the components of that rate increase, and so that this year, the original amount would have been CPI plus 2.1 was the starting point within our long-term financial plan. We did, one of the components of our rate increase is the indexation of the financial assistance grants, and the fact that we, in the past, over the last 10 years or so, we don't tend to get indexation. So we actually build in a 0.3 rate increase to offset that. But this year we did get that. So we each year, if we do get full indexation of our grants, we do pull that 0.3% component out for that year. And then the other bit was we build in about 0.4% above CPI for local government costs in our operating. And the main bits that tend to be a little bit above CPI for us particularly, you know, are things like depreciation and wage expenses that aren't, you know, part of a CPI calculation. And what we've got this year is we haven't got our wage increases is fixed. It's not linked to CPI within our EB, and so that's actually pushed our local, you know, that percentage is slightly lower than it has been in some other years. So we've brought that down to 0.2 rather than 0.4. So that being lower than it was predicted is based on some of those components just moving around a little bit.
Thank you. Do any other members have a comment to make, particularly about Sutu's concern about the level of the rate rise? I'll just go to you, Sutu.
Yeah, look, I mean, for the last 2 years, we've been talking about a break even by 26, 27. We're still not at break even. So when are we likely to break even on our budgets? Because my personal opinion is if we don't increase the current rate, we're never going to get to a break even position on this council. I mean, we've got over 90 legacy issues that we're trying to address. I just think it's irresponsible of us to sit there and accept a rate rise that isn't going to cover our costs. And I think the general public need to be aware of that fact that, you know, if we can't meet our costs, we just won't do half of the stuff we're intending to do. And, you know, as we've also pointed out at council level, you know, within the next 18 months, 2 years, we're going to have the hydrogen hub starting, etc. Our town's not ready for it. We've got no accommodation. We've got issues. We're not getting our town ready to take this influx of people. So, you know, something's got to give. And I think we can justify a high increase on that basis, that we're gearing the town up for its future.
Thank you. Bill, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, well, I appreciate and understand everything that Saltos is saying. As a councillor, I don't think we get away with any more than 4.9%. I think we just, the public will accept it. I don't believe it.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Can I just suggest to the committee in terms of how we move forward is, Sutu, if you're happy just to, you know, at this stage, park your thoughts and we'll just move through the report and discuss it a bit further, the report, and then, you know, when we come at the end, we can, you know, work out. You can have a think about an appropriate recommendation and then the committee can discuss that. You happy with that way moving forward? Is that all right?
I am, Alan, thanks.
Thank you. So I might just move through the report and the attachments, and I've got a few comments, and I'll just invite the committee members to, you know, make any comments as we go forward. Just want to go to page 6 of the agenda. I just want to query the comment there that in the last paragraph in the first dot point that says the draft 2023 annual business plan has been prepared in line with the adopted parameters and in an environment consisting of, and it's got an operating deficit predicted by the council's long-term financial plan. Is that correct? I think the predicted long-term financial plan deficit's is significantly different to the one that's before us.
Oh, that's correct. So yes, the actual deficit within this budget is higher than what was in the long-term financial plan, but the long-term financial plan did predict a deficit position already.
The quantum is quite different, isn't it?
Quantum is different, yes.
Yeah. Just moving to page 7, it just the difference appears to come from two places, and you know, they're articulated there in the top of page 7. So it's the airport, which we can get to, and then an increase in expenses, and it appears that there's been a significant increase in the employee cost budget compared to what was predicted. Can staff provide just a bit of background to that increase, please?
Yeah, I'll respond to that one in the first instance, Alan. Back in October 2020, and then through to probably about January 2021, we had discussions with both the councillors, staff and unions regarding the organisational structure and the resources capacity within the organisation. When I first started, we had something like about 26 direct reports to the second level directors in the organisation. And that third level of direct reports included positions ranging in titles from manager, coordinator, advisor, assistant, etc., etc. So in short, there was very poor structure in the organisation and a great level of confusion in terms of the roles and responsibilities of the different positions and levels within the organisation. We went through an organisational realignment process where we deliberately set out to establish a very deliberate third level management within the organisation, which we've clearly titled as managers. So we now have 9 or 10 managers in the organisation, and a number of positions and people that were previously at that third level are now at the 4th level within the organisation, and we're transitioning our capabilities and capacity. My sense at the time was that the organisational structure had obviously evolved over a period of time, and my observations, which was presented to the council at the time, was that I think the organisation had been trying too hard to put some very elaborate titles on positions in order to try and attract or encourage staff to come to Whyalla to work. But what that did do was created a real sense of confusion and ambiguity around who was responsible for what. So with the council's support, we've set about undertaking an organisational realignment. That has resulted in an increase in the number of FTEs, particularly at that third level, which are a little bit more expensive than some of the other positions. But we believe that the structure that is now in place was necessary to really lift the capability and capacity of the organisation, noting that really the third level managers are the leaders in the organisation and they'll create the future leaders. And we needed a higher level of expertise at that third level management to really do some of the heavy lifting that was previously being done by the CEO and directors. Not that the CEO and directors are adverse to doing heavy lifting, but what was happening was that the executive were doing a lot of the day-to-day operational heavy lifting and not really putting their minds to the planning and strategies needed to progress the organisation going forward. We have essentially a bit like our city, a candle burning at two ends, where at one end of the spectrum we do have a lot of legacy issues, both within our city and within the organisation, that we need to get on top of, as well as Councillor Soto Supos mentioned previously, we need to start planning for the future development of our city to become a regional capital city of significance, noting the form and role and function of Whyalla in terms of how it serves the state and the national interest going forward. So we've got an uneasy and uncomfortable period that we need to go through, where some people may think that we have started to move too early in terms of trying to build our resource capacity within the organisation. But without those additional resources, we're going to be stuck in the paradigm that existed back in October 2020 and January 2021. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but the short version is that we have put on additional staff, but in a very planned, informed and a constructive manner. Sorry, Alan, you're on mute again.
Try again. Thank you for those comments, Justin. So just reflecting on that, it's not up to this committee to say, whether that's reasonable or unreasonable about the need of the additional resources. But obviously, with the additional resources come the need to fund that, and the draft long-term financial plan, I think that's been put towards us at this stage, isn't showing a funding source for those additional resources. And so I think the the report is actually quite clear, and I do want to thank the staff for the way that it's been put, because you haven't shied away from stating the fact that you know, this is an expansionary budget, which when you look at the long-term financial plan, it hasn't yet developed a strategy for how that's going to be funded. So Justin, I don't know if you want to give some background and, you know, perhaps indicate how you intend in the future that may be funded.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I think the key thing to keep in context, again, as Councillor Stupos mentioned before, we essentially are on the cusp of what, I don't know, it sounds a bit cliche, but a once in a generation opportunity in terms of significant investment in our city around hydrogen hydrogen reduction, export and use locally. The quantum of the investment, private sector investment, is still unknown at this point in time, but through the election period, the former Liberal government did release one media statement that referred to in the order of about $13 billion worth of private sector investment being planned for the Port Bonython area, being a combination of the investment proposed by 7 companies that had been shortlisted and were working with the former state government in terms of the hydrogen cluster at Port Bonython. We know that both the federal government and state government on both sides of politics are supportive of hydrogen, and at the state level that was very evident with the state Labor, now current state government, committing to building a $593 million hydrogen fueled power station, which is a +1 in terms of the development to what the former Marshall government had already been working on in terms of the hydrogen cluster, with the 7 multinational companies proposing an investment in that facility. If there would be no other region in South Australia with that level of investment forecast over the next, even if you say 10 years. And for our city, that is significant, given that one of the council's key strategic directions or initiatives was looking at diversifying our economy and moving away from what has been a perennial problem with our city, where there's a perception that we're a one-horse town, with GFG having the steelworks and the mining interests. So again, a bit of a long-winded answer, but we see that the future urban renewal of our city, the opportunity to leverage this once-in-a-generational opportunity with both the federal government, state government and the private sector to get the urban renewal of our city, and noting that within the next couple of years we'll also be moving to capital valuations as the basis of our rating distribution. What is not factored into the long-term financial plan is the expected growth in rate revenue that we anticipate will come from the private sector investment in both Port Bonython and the flow-on investment in our city, both in the form of residential accommodation, but as well as government and business development in our city. So we haven't tried to quantify that. It would be unrealistic to try to quantify what future revenue stream might be from new development. That we're confident with all of the factors in play at present that Whyalla is on the cusp of a significant opportunity, and if we leverage that opportunity with having good workforce in place to prosecute the business case to the private sector, federal government and state government in terms of the urban renewal that is required to underpin the hydrogen development, we believe that we're in a good position.
Thank you.
Just that talks about an increase in income going forward. We also believe that there are opportunities to improve our operations and the cost effectiveness of our operations. Again, one of our legacy issues is our IT systems are not serving council or our community particularly well. Again, you need resources on hand to be able to implement changes to systems, both IT systems and business processes, to unlock some of the cost efficiencies in terms of council service delivery. We also believe, although this is not yet fully tested, that given the impending investment in Whyalla and given the role and function of Whyalla in the state context, noting that we're the second largest city outside of Metro Adelaide and the largest in to the north, that council is well positioned to be able to deliver services to other councils and potentially the state government and generate some income and some cost efficiencies, again from scale, if we're able to deliver some services for the broader region. So there's a number of opportunities there where we can make some savings. And for the pessimist that thinks that hydrogen doesn't work, if that is the case and this window of opportunity closes without the investment progressing, we would be able to essentially restructure our organisation back to a smaller scale, noting that all of the managers that have been employed at that third level are all on fixed term contracts.
Okay, thank you. I do want to just I wouldn't mind just quickly just sharing some reflections on the draft or the updated long-term financial plan that was included in the agenda, so Appendix C. Obviously, there are two items there. One is that of concern, and one is the continued deficit, and the other one is the inability or the requirement to continue borrowing, to increase the borrowing over the period of the plan. And so I guess as the plan is developed and as the council looks at how it can balance those items, I think for me there's those two items. One is the deficit, but also the funding, because the current plan that's there certainly, as the report indicates, isn't sustainable. I also do note in the report that this issue is being workshopped with the elected members, so that's encouraging. I also note on page 9, the bottom of page 9, that there are requirements from the new legislation regarding the presentation of rate increases that haven't been included in the draft but will be in a future draft. And I just want to now perhaps go back, from the macro, just if we could perhaps discuss the issue of the airport. That seems to be a gift that keeps on giving at each audit committee meeting, and there is, there is a request there that there perhaps be future discussions about how the financial performance of the airport should be measured. So, Grant, I don't know if you want to give any comments to that at this stage.
So yes, as outlined in the report, obviously there are some a few different areas for the airport. So the last couple of years we've had quite significant drops in passenger numbers, and so the plan is sort of has projected out that recovery to be a little bit longer, over at least the next 2 years, sort of back to pre-COVID levels. So that's impacting on the current financial position of the airport, but also obviously we've had to do some quite large upgrades at the airport for security, and we're also doing some runway ones from a safety and future perspective. So that's also putting a bit of pressure on there. And then, as outlined in the report, some of the grant funding we did receive for that terminal and security upgrade have some conditions around what can be recovered through to passengers. So that puts a bit of pressure on the financial position as well. And even, and just with that post-COVID recovery and I guess dealing with the airlines and real increases in passenger tax and that sort of thing, that's a challenge as well. So there's lots of stuff happening at the airport, and that's impacting on the long-term sort of financial position of the airport. There are a couple of items that may help to bring it back a little bit. As I said, some of the useful lives for the assets we're building have been quite conservatively estimated. So as we actually capitalise and bring them online in the next over this year, we should have better projections for that, and that might actually improve the position slightly. But a few challenges that we're dealing with.
Okay, thank you. When I look at the figures you've presented in the report on page 7 and compare those to the current long-term financial plan, just in round terms, towards the end of the plan, it's costing council an additional $500,000 a year for the airport. So, that's a difficult area which will require funding, additional funding going forward. The issue there of what the appropriate target is. If the government isn't willing to or doesn't allow council to fund some depreciation, whether that's appropriate for that to be part of the target for financial sustainability purposes. And I haven't given a lot of thought, but depreciation is meant to be an estimate of the cost of the asset over the period of the life of the asset. Could be quite easily argued that, and appropriately argued, that if it's not costing council anything, therefore it's not unreasonable to not include that cost. Just to be clear, council will definitely need to include that cost in its financial statements, but in terms of its financial targets, I would be open to discussing, whether council's financial targets might be more appropriate with an adjustment for that capital expenditure that you can't have depreciation against. So perhaps at a future audit committee meeting, we might want to staff might want to give more, provide a report on that. I'm not sure that it will make a huge difference. I think just talking to Justin before the meeting, I think we're talking about $200,000 a year or something in that vicinity. Don't know if any members have any comments on that. No. Look, I think we don't have any other particular questions. I might direct members' attention to the recommendation there.
Sorry, Alan, there's Peter here. There is one question I'd just like to ask, sorry.
Certainly, go ahead, Peter.
Page 8, there's a reference about the level of vacant positions, and I think it was Justin that mentioned that the FTE has been increased. How does that kind of fit in with that? What does that actually mean? Are those vacant positions part of, say, natural attrition, or are there redundancies planned, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Grant might be able to add in. So in the past, when we've budgeted for or prepared our budgets, we've always looked at providing a budget for on the assumption that all positions were filled at all times, noting that when some positions become vacant with natural attrition, we may need to backfill that person whilst we're recruiting. But what we're now doing is moving away and effectively budgeting for that natural attrition. So so working on the assumption that not all positions are going to be filled at all times. It's essentially an estimate of what the reduced costs might be if we assume historical staff turnover rates continue to occur, so the plan is always to have positions filled. However, unfortunately, Whyalla, given its location and various other factors, has had in the past relatively high staff turnover, and when we do need to fill positions, sometimes it actually does take us a fair while to be able to find a suitable incumbent for that role. So we will factor into the budget essentially a cost savings associated with some positions not being full for the whole 12 months.
Justin, it was a bit hard to hear some of that. So, Peter, did you understand all of that? Was that clear for you?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I just ask members to consider a recommendation. I did take the liberty to just provide some wording for to express kind of my thoughts about the issue, and I'm wondering if they can be put up. And yeah, thank you. Also, Councillor Stupas, did you have anything you would like to be considered in terms of the recommendation?
No, look, I think Part B and C cover what I was attempting to do. My concern is that whilst I may want 4.9 plus 0.5 to try and cover off, I know that the fellow councillors will outvote me on the basis that Councillor Simpson has said the people of Whyalla can't afford it, which seems to be the general consensus. My frustration being on this council is that for the last 3 years, I've been arguing that the rate rises haven't been commensurate with our long-term financial plan. And my argument in previous years has been if we were to increase on a slow basis for the last 3 years, we wouldn't be copping this big hit in the jugular today. But the trouble is that we just keep kicking that can down the road. Unfortunately, we may not be able to kick the can in a few years' time because we're probably technically going to be insolvent. So, yeah, I think the clear message has to go back to the councillors that they either support our recommendation on the audit committee or be it at your own peril. That's me.
Thank you. Look, I'll perhaps just go to Justin first, and then to Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. I just wanted to make a comment. I'll do it every year for every council I ever work for, but Everyone gets fixated on the percentage increase, and 4.9 sounds like a reasonably large increase when it comes to rates. The thing to note with that 4.9 is that equates to $1 per week for the average residential ratepayer. And in our case in Whyalla, 38% of our general rates is from the fixed charge. I couldn't quickly find the number, but I think it's close to 4,000 of our ratepayers currently pay a fixed charge, and the proposal is not to increase the fixed charge. The fixed charge applies to those properties that are lower value, and one can make the assumption that they're occupied by people that have less capacity to pay an increase in rates. So the 4.9 is not generally going to be hitting those people who have got least capacity to pay rates. And again, I emphasise $1 per week is what the average increase will be, which to me is not an unreasonable amount. There has been some thought about increasing the fixed charge. However, strategically, we are looking to hold that until we get to the discussion and the modelling around the introduction of capital values, because when capital values do come in, some ratepayers will have a much higher rate to pay by virtue of their capital values relative to other ratepayers within our city. So to buffer that impact, having the ability to adjust the fixed charge and the differential rates at a future point in time, that gives us more capacity. And sorry, I've been referring to the fixed charge, but I'm actually should be referring to the minimum rate. Grant, did you want to just add to what I just said?
Thanks, Justin. So we have decided not to put the fixed charge up for each property. As Justin said, that's going to give us, as we do know that change is coming to capital rating in a couple of years' time. So we'll have to adopt that by the 24-25 financial year, and we'll have to do a rate review before that time. And yeah, I mean, we have seen what, for instance, our neighbouring council, one of our neighbouring councils experienced with the recent move to capital value rather than site value. So we just want to have sort of some of those items up our sleeve as we get there, and being able to increase the fixed charge by a bit at that point in time will assist with that. Yes, so that's one of the reasons we're not putting that up, proposing for this year.
Thank you. Bill, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I've changed my line of comment a bit since the last two speakers have spoken. It would be in all our favour if we scrapped percentages. Because as Justin says, 4.9% equates to $1. If you keep talking $1, you won't get any complaints. Talk 4.9%, people go, oh.
I can give a comment on that. So actually one of the changes to the Act is that you do actually have to express as a percentage change and in dollar terms to the average property. So that's one of the things they're wanting councils actually to present, so that all councils present rate increases in a similar manner. There have been some issues over time with councils doing some slightly tricky things with their fixed charges, rates in the dollar, and how they word it. So there will be a specific way that you have to outline your rate increase. That was what Alan had alluded to later. So that will be the Appendix C to the annual business plan. It will be in a very fixed template that all councils use, and it will express the rate increase as a percentage and as a dollar increase. So that's a requirement.
I understand that, but people see the percentage as being higher than $1, and that's what gets people back up, I think.
Yeah, I think the other comment I make is one of the things that I always have liked about the Whyalla city's annual business plan is it does present a very clear picture of what it is doing, of its projects each year, and it does demonstrate what council is doing for the community. So, in terms of what people are paying, I think, it's very clear to them about what direction the council's embarking on. Councillor Stupas, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I have. Just for Bill's sake, I mean, I think we do a pretty good job in our public consultation when we go to the general public. It's not hard to sit there and show examples that, yes, it's 4.9%, but it's only really $1.50 a week. Compare that to, say, the price of petrol, which has gone up 22%, but it's only jumped by about 43 cents a litre. We can show that clearly, and that can be clearly communicated to the general public that come to our consultation meeting. It's all about sales, Bill, as you know.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I went through every one last year as you did, but people still take the higher figures being it's out of reach, or it's too high. That's the only thing, that's the only comment I'm making. I understand that $1's a dollar. $1's 4.9%, big deal.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more discussion on this item? If we don't have any discussion, the recommendation is before you. Would there be someone willing to move that? Councillor Stupas has moved it, seconded by Councillor Simpson. I will put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Okay, well, I do thank the staff for that report, and obviously within that report, I think there are some comments about the impact of the, on the long-term financial plan. So, I would hope that some of those, the relevant comments can be carried forward to the council report, so that just councillors are aware of the reason why this committee was concerned about the impact of this budget on the long-term financial plan. Councillor Simpson, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just before we closed, I have a question on page 49, rate capping. I've never seen that in any document before, that we have a rate capping of 25%. Can that be explained to me?
Certainly.
Yep, I can.
Who would like to take that?
Yep, I'll take that one. So yes, so it's just something that it sits in our rate policy. We've had it, so it's to stop abnormally large, if you get a really big change in valuations for one property in any given year, that it can smooth out. But we've got our percentage at quite a high, 25% is a very high amount for that. Some councils have sort of 10 to 12% as their percentage, and that's something I think we'll review as well as part of our mechanisms for implementing the change to capital values. We'll probably need a much lower rate cap to smooth out large changes for properties. But yeah, that one has been in there in previous years. That sits within our rate policy.
Thank you.
Can I just, it's a good segue to a question I was going to ask, and it has been alluded to, but what is council's plan or timing for move to capital value rating? Yep.
So the thinking was that it would we want to do the consultation with the community on a rating review separate from our annual business plan process, so that the two don't get sort of confused together in terms of rate increase and rate policy. So the thinking would be that the time of year would be around October, November, after the sort of end of year, but before we get into the full budget process. So obviously with the elections this year, that doesn't work. So the thinking is sort of around November 2023 to go out and do a rating review, ready for the adoption of the 24, and then obviously then we'll consult on the 24-25 annual business plan with that updated rating policy. So that's the year that you have to have adopted that rate change by.
Okay, so the plan is that you will adopt it in the last year that you have to adopt it in.
Yes.
Just my reflection is that you will probably need to provide considerable time for the community to discuss the changes, because it is a complex issue. And you know, as you alluded to your northern neighbour, it was a difficult and continues to be a difficult transition for them. Yes, Justin.
Just adding to what Grant's just said, that's the current plan. We are mindful that there are, I think, about 10 other councils, 10, 11 other councils who'll be in the same situation as us. And most of those happen to be on the Eyre Peninsula. So whilst that's our current plan, if all the other councils start to do their consultation, say sooner than that, we might revisit the timing of our consultation so that we can do it as a collective. We haven't discussed the pros and cons of that just yet, noting that obviously Whyalla is much larger than most of those other councils. So I think we'll have a bit more of a robust process that we'll need to go through. But just wanted to mention that there are other councils, and we will look to try to do some things co-jointly where there's merit in doing so.
Thank you. Okay, well, that's the end of our business today. So I will close the meeting at noon. I do thank everyone for their participation, and for those that were viewing the meeting remotely, and wish everyone well, and bring the members' attention, or everyone's attention, to the next meeting date of the 9th of May. And look forward to seeing you then.